Welcome to Tales from the Trenches Tuesdays. Today, it is my honor to have Dolph Goldenburg with me. Dolph has a track record of guiding organizations through leadership transitions, strategic planning, and board development. In his 11th year as a nonprofit executive, Dolph lost touch with himself, experienced extreme burnout in 2013, and was horrified to realize that he had become a toxic human being. After giving 8 months' notice and onboarding his replacement, Dolph spent almost a year wandering the globe to rediscover a sense of awe, his compassion, and his zest for life. Guess what? He found it. Dolph started successful nonprofits in late 2014 to strengthen the nonprofit sector through consulting, podcasting, and publishing. It's one of the few consulting practices that has published a manifesto and is guided by principle, not profit. His clients have included large nonprofits like North Coast Opportunities and Hope Atlanta, and also small but mighty nonprofits like the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund and Pebble Tossers. So, welcome, Dolph.
Thank you, Jack. It's so good to be here.
But what I was really interested in is you said that you don't do so much on the fundraising, you're doing more on the nonprofit leadership. So, so many times I'm finding that people don't know how to know whether their fundraisers are actually doing a good job and what the metrics are. Because some people say it's about the dollars being brought in. Other people will say it's moves management, which I've always found you can kind of cloud it, and I can come up with a whole bunch of moves. It's really not moving a needle at all. But I can say, look, I did 75 visits this month, and it doesn't do anything. So how do you deal with that as a consultant and an expert?
And so I think it depends on whether we're talking about short term or long term, and I also think it depends on where your development team members are in their tenure, and also, frankly, how developed your development function and your fundraising function are. But so short term, it is really about the activities that we know build relationships and generate revenue. And I say this before I was an executive director and before I was a consultant, I was a development director, and I've done a lot of fundraising. And so we know that really this is about relationships. And we know that if you put relationships into the fundraising machine, it will result in getting money. And we just know that. So short term, if you're looking at this on a quarterly, a monthly, weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis, it's the inputs. If you're looking at it on a yearly or more than that basis, like how much have we raised every year for the last 2 years or 3 years, then it is the metrics. The other thing I think that we've got to be looking at is acquisition and retention, because acquisition and retention tell us more than anything else how successful we are at building new relationships and maintaining our existing ones. And so if we believe fundraising is about relationships, we have to be looking at those two.
Yeah. I think that the national average is that, the donor retention is less than 50%. Right? So that means that, like, if you were doing a race, you'd be going backwards.
Right.
It's not sustainable, and you're just spending so much time getting new folks in the door. But if you're only keeping less than half of them, you're going to drown pretty quick.
You will, but I'll share with you, in order to grow your program, you've got to at least meet the national average. And the AFP, the Association of Fundraising Professionals, actually publishes the national average for retention based on a number of different sectors too. So not just all nonprofits, but for example, education or social services. And so when we do strategic planning, we always do a little mini fundraising assessment as part of that. And one of the things that I find really illustrative and important for an organization to see is we'll lay out their retention rate or their attrition rate over a 5 or 6 year period, and then we will draw a line of where their donor base would be at if they just were at the national average. And sometimes their donor base is well above, which means they're beating the average. Sometimes their donor base ends up well below. And the reason we like to do that, is if you've got, say, 1,000 donors, and you're missing the mark by just 2% a year. You spread that over 5 years, and suddenly you start to see a real delta between, hey, if we were just at the national average, we'd be this high,
Right.
and now we have 100 or 150 fewer donors.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny because I often say it's much easier to keep a donor than it is to go out and acquire one. It's also much less costly. But so many folks are just kind of in that race. Well, just get new donors, right? And then they set it and forget it. And there seems to be a huge disconnect. So when you're talking to executive directors or directors of development who have to go out and hire staff, what are some of the traits that you say that they should be looking for in getting the right person on that bus?
So that is such a great question. So the first, obviously, is what are the relationship skills like? And that's something that we can assess in the recruitment process. But the first is absolutely relationship skills. The second is how organized are they, and how good are they with follow through? Because if you tell a donor, "Oh, I'm going to send you something by next Tuesday," and you don't, the donor
Yeah,
is going to know it. And
game over.
the donor's gonna think they're done, been there, done that, made that mistake. The donor's gonna think they're not a priority.
Right.
So then you also really want to assess, like, what's their ability to prioritize and to get things done. And then the last thing that I think is an undervalued asset in fundraising is the ability to write well and persuasively. And this is true whether you are writing a thank you letter that hopefully you're only going to use for a month. My pet peeve is to get the same thank you letter 6 months later from the same organization. Pet peeve.
Right.
But writing skills are so important, whether you're going to be writing a case statement, or you're going to be writing a thank you letter, or you're going to be writing just an individual email, maybe to a major donor to say thank you for something, or to explain something, or apologize, or whatever. And so I think we've also got to assess those writing skills. And I'll share with you, in terms of hiring, I think about an empty seat is better than a bad hire. Every single day of the
Hmm.
week, I'd rather say to my board or my executive director, "Hey, we're not getting this done because we don't have someone in the position. We can't find the right person." Than, "Oh, we're not getting this done because I hired a knucklehead. I made a mistake and hired the wrong person." But the other thing is, I know a lot of organizations in this current market are saying, "Oh, we can't afford to vet candidates better than we're currently vetting them." And from my perspective, if you have a candidate who comes in and says, "I believe in your mission and I am really excited about the opportunity to be a part of your development team," and then also says, "But I'm not willing to invest 90 minutes of my time for which you're going to pay me to show you what I can do," they're not a good fit.
I would wholeheartedly agree on that one. Um, I've also contended over time, and I've been in this business for almost 30 years. I would say that almost half, at least, of the fundraisers that I have met don't like asking for money. And it's the most bizarre thing. I'm like, well, that's what you do, right? Like that's your job, when you boil it down. Do you find that, or am I kind of
I
out in
I
left
do.
field?
I 100% find that, and I also think I know where it comes from. And this is not exclusive just to the nonprofit sector, but because I know this is true for a lot of for-profit businesses too. But oftentimes we will take someone who is good at their job and give them what seems like the next step in their career without providing them with the mentoring, coaching, and support necessary to be successful. And so, for example, what I often see organizations do is either internally promote a development associate to a major gifts officer or a development director position, or hire someone from the outside who up to this point has been a development associate, really a behind the scenes position where you're managing the CRM and writing some letters and doing a little bit of external work, but you're not really actually going out with your lead volunteers to solicit gifts. And we assume, well, they've been great at all this, surely they're going to be great at actually helping our lead volunteers with solicitations. And because we've not given them the coaching, mentoring support necessary to be successful, they're not. And then we scratch our heads and we say, they were so good at the other step. Why can't they do this?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. Uh, Many times folks are kind of promoted and they're just put into a position and just go figure it out, right? I had to
Right.
figure it out. You have to go
Yeah.
figure it out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that's just not a recipe for success.
Yeah. And let me also be clear, like I'm not I've made these mistakes. I mean, before I burned out and before I became a toxic person, honestly, if I hired you in a development position, there was a 50-50 chance you're either going to be a superstar or I was probably going to have to terminate you because you could not do the job. And when I came back from my sabbatical and was really committed to how do I do this work without frankly, without having the weight, without doing the harm in the world, I realized, yeah, I need to do a better job both of vetting, but I also need to do a better job of being clear about what someone can and can't do and provide them with that support and that training and that coaching so they can do their job. So if I'm going to hire a diamond in the rough, I need to be prepared to buff that diamond.
Absolutely amazing to chat with you. If people wanted to get hold of you, how would they go about doing that?
So the best way, if you go to successfulnonprofits.com, and that's our consulting practices website. I'm also on LinkedIn. I always joke there's only one Dolph Goldenburg in the world. So if you look on LinkedIn for Dolph Goldenburg, you will find me.
There you go. Dolph, absolutely amazing. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Jack. It's so good to see you again.
Hi, folks. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button right here.